I am not sure whether you have heard of this front page story which appeared in the New York Times over the weekend in their Sunday edition. And it's probably still up for you to read for yourself at the New York Times website. As you know, they take that down after a few days, and you can only read the full article after you have a paid subscription to that newspaper. But this time, I would have to say this was basically an excellent investigative piece of journalism, which is rare for the Times these days. And the article was entitled "Behind Analysts, the Pentagon's Hidden Hand." This article is very, very important, and it's my understanding that it wasn't really covered on the network news. Of course, that is no surprise because it concerns the network news. And it's written by David Barstow, who was the investigative reporter on this story. There is, as many of us have already noticed, of course, and knew all along, was that the news coverage of the war and the military analysts appearing on virtually every network was essentially always in favor of the war, with only very, very few dissenting voices. But the New York Times has actually obtained proof positive that this was actually going on. I probably wouldn't go as far as to say that this is the equivalent of publishing the Pentagon Papers, but it is an excellent piece of investigative journalism, and please go to the website right now. Don't even try to watch this video if you're watching it on Monday, because the story is still up. It was still up 2 hours ago. It's a long story and it takes time to read it, but it's proof positive that the American public was manipulated by the Pentagon and the various so-called military experts appearing on the networks in favor of the war, and that it was a concerted effort to mislead the American public. The New York Times obtained this information, essentially 8,000 pages of emails, internal emails between these analysts and the Pentagon, by suing the Defense Department. They won that suit, and so they have published the results of their research through this article. And I'll read you a few juicy pieces from this. Hidden behind the appearance of objectivity is a Pentagon information apparatus that has used those analysts, those military analysts appearing on the networks talking about progress of the war, coming wars, and so on, to generate favorable news coverage of the administration's wartime performance. An examination by the New York Times has found the effort, which began with the build-up to the Iraq War, and it essentially continues to today. Now, before I go on reading some of these little excerpts here, it is quite commendable, I would have to say, for the New York Times to finally come clean and to publish something like this on their front page, especially when we're worried about the run-up for the next war against Iran. And so probably some of these people at the top at the New York Times are having some scruples at this point as to whether this administration is, by employing these tactics and using these analysts on our networks over and over again, is not actually preparing the American public for the next war, and possibly even as all wars go, you know, it's unpredictable, possibly even World War III. So perhaps people with some influence in the press are having some scruples over all this. So this might be a good development, but it will not be a good development if nobody hears these stories and if it's not widely disseminated. So the story itself goes on to say, records and interviews show how the Bush administration has used its control over access and information in an effort to transform the analysts, the military analysts that is, into a kind of media Trojan horse, an instrument intended to shape terrorism coverage from inside the major TV and radio networks. And the documents that they have up there at the New York Times are absolutely proof positive of this. A few analysts expressed regret for participating in what they regarded as an effort to dupe the American public with propaganda dressed as independent analysis, military analysis. Ken Allard, a former NBC military analyst who has taught information warfare at the National Defense University, said the campaign amounted to a very sophisticated information operation. It was a coherent and active policy. The Times, as I said before, successfully sued the Defense Department to gain access to 8,000 pages of email messages, transcripts, records describing years of private briefings, trips to Iraq, Guantanamo Bay, and an extensive Pentagon talking points operation. The records reveal a symbiotic relationship where the usual dividing lines between government and journalism have been completely obliterated. Internal Pentagon documents repeatedly refer to the military analysts as message force multipliers, or surrogates who could be counted on to deliver administration themes and messages to millions of Americans in the form of their own opinions. This article, folks, is pretty explosive. You should really read it. Not only were these military analysts spewing out propaganda coming from the White House and our administration and the Pentagon, it goes much deeper than that. The military analysts, essentially, most of them had conflicts of interests because they sat on the boards of military defense contractors in civilian life, thus furthering their own financial interests through this positive coverage. In other words, this is war profiteering, folks. War profiteering par excellence. I'm not sure if I can even finish this in a one-part video, and I know people get bored with two or three-part videos, but you know, people need to wake up and read some of this stuff. It's just unbelievable, and everything is being confirmed. What those of us who were suspicious of it all along is once again being confirmed. At the same time, in email messages to the Pentagon, one of the analysts displayed an eagerness to be supportive with his television and radio commentary. Please let me know if you have any specific points you want to have covered or that you want me to downplay. He wrote in a January 2007 email before President Bush went on TV to describe the surge strategy in Iraq. This is part one. There will be a part two to this.